how does a European knight charge against the Muslim? Like, how does he align that with Christ? Well, he's looking at Christ and he's saying, there's a man who put a boundary down all through up Spain. And there comes a point where you say, like, I might go and fight these guys and I'm probably going to die, but I have to die for something. I have to die. There has to be somewhere where I say it's over. And you look at Christ and then you understand. You become anti-life. You become a rebellion against that. You're basically just dying. That's all you are. And you're trying to pull as much of the people who are in the light as possible with you. But that's your only goal. It's like a cancer. It doesn't know what it's doing. It's just absorbing resources. And then once it kills the body, it dies as well. And it's like, oh, that was a mistake.
They're angry. They're angry with themselves. They're angry with the world. And it's this internal disposition because they're against the structure of reality. They're in opposition to logos itself.
O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
These ideologies come in and it confuses you use the metaphor of the body, the psyche, and therefore the body itself stops defending. That men have to be rooted within some perspective of tradition and time and ancestry. And without that, you're rootless and nothing can grow that has no roots. And so without roots, it equals death and you just atrophy. And we look at the feminization of men in the West. We look at even the testosterone rates, the skeletal structure. I mean, the width of shoulders, like men just aren't looking the way they used to look. And this is part of a lack of purpose, a lack of structure, a lack of rootedness, a lack of tradition. And it's just a nasty perpetual process that, because they don't know what to do, then they just feed on their own pleasure. And a man cannot be led by pleasure. Hedonism, I think, is the death to masculinity. Because as you're talking about going to martial arts or sparring or getting in shape, everything that we respect men for takes a lot of effort and discipline. And that's really what we look for when we look at great men. We look at something that takes effort, competency, skill, discipline, and it could be whatever. You could be an artist. You could be it doesn't matter what it is, but as men, that's what we look for. That's what we look to. And you look at our cultures and who are the competent people? Who are the competent people in Irish culture or American culture? And that's where even like a Conor McGregor, like you were talking about, during that, at least it gives some sort of hope because there's a relationality to him being Irish, and then the martial arts, the masculinity, the bravado. It gives you a sense of directionality in regards to, masculinity of some sort. So, we can go that. By the way, I want to tell everybody, please smash that like. And later, when we start to wind down this conversation, we're going to open it up so anybody can hop in here. We're going to open up the Zoom meeting. We'll probably do that in about maybe 30 more minutes. You guys can hop in if you got something you want to add. So send in your super chats, and then stay tuned. Here in about 30 minutes, we'll open it up for everybody to come in. But I wanted to, again, the basis of today's stream, Raging Against the Dying of the Light, actually comes from a poem by Dylan Thomas, a Welshman. And so I was wanting to just read that. It's real short. Read that, and we can talk about, and then just everything we just said, rally around this concept about raging against the dying of the light. And so it goes,
Let's go for it.
Do not go gentle into the good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see the blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And so Dylan Thomas wrote this about his father, who was struggling with health problems and that he was nearing death. I think he died actually a few years later. But this metaphor about raging against the dying of the light has become a trope in Western culture. And so for me, the light is Christ, the light is God. And so when we're talking about all the ills that we just described about Western culture, whether it be, continental Europe, the UK, America, Canada, we're seeing the light, I would argue, of God, the Logos itself, being dimmed, not that it itself is dimming, but that the culture itself is putting the detritus of darkness over it further and further and further. And so this is an impetus for all men. We come from different perspectives. You're more of a Nietzschean Jungian. I'm an Orthodox Christian. But at least we can come together in the sense that there is a calling for all men to rage against the dying of the light, the good, the true, and the beautiful. And so speak a little bit to the impetus of masculinity in Western society right now, and that there's a calling for all of us.
I think that's a really, really important idea, and especially bickering about various ideological perspectives, it gets you nowhere. Sitting around and being like, it has to be Nietzsche, it has to be Nietzsche. It's like, what are you going to achieve with that, bro? Good on you and all this. And fundamentally, when you study these guys and all this, they come back to these very simple, big ideas. You look at the idea of, or what is this world? What does this world have to give? What was Western civilization? You had these men who crafted out of the chaos of the reality heaven on earth in some ways. They had such incredible heights of culture, incredible technological advances, incredible beauty and health. Look at the people. There's some of the most beautiful people in the world are Westerners. Incredible moral sophistication. It's just beyond belief. You look back at that, you see all those trad return accounts, and you look back and you're like, man, what is where we live in the ruins of something that was amazing all that time before. And you could very easily say that the world has a logos, the world has a law instantiated by the Lord, instantiated by God, instantiated by the Creator. There's whoever built this thing, he put together an operational system, and if you align with that, you get rewarded with things. This is Platonic idea 101. If you're honest about the way the world works, you have to understand that the truth about the world is good. The laws about the world is good. So align yourself with those laws, and it will be good. And if it is good, it will give you good things, which is life and health and success and joy and fertility and continuance. And then that will be beautiful. The more good you are, the more beautiful you become. There's another one I'd like to add to that as well, is the idea of strength, because I think this is really realistic. If you go into the gym and you study like a man in the gym and you think about what's happening, you go into the gym and you realize, I'm not good enough. I'm not working out properly. I'm not eating food properly. I haven't got a good discipline profile. And you go and you do all the right actions. You go and you study it like the Lord has put together a plan. And he says, if you do the right actions in this, something good will happen. So you have to go in honestly, be sincere with yourself. You do the right operations and something good happens. You start to grow, you become bigger, you become stronger. You also become more beautiful. And all of these things are related. Strength, health, beauty, life, good. All these things are very, in a simple, elegant, and natural way, are all there. And you see so many people trying to attack this from all different angles. They don't want you to be strong. They don't want you to be good. They want you to be transgressive. They don't want you to tell the truth. They want you to believe everything's relative. They don't want you to be beautiful. They want you to be ugly. They don't want you to believe that God's in control of that stuff. They want you to believe that everything's upside down, or he's fake, or he's not real, or all these type of things. And this is a core that everybody's trying to fight. That's ultimately what all dudes are striving towards.
Right.
And when you talk about a civilization of people, like Western man as an abstract concept, our united masculine spirit, that's ultimately what we're fighting for when it comes down to it. We want that for ourselves and to share it among ourselves and to create beautiful projects. From the very grounded sense of we'd like, our little trad wife and trad household, all the way up to the idea of let's build a fucking cathedral or a massive bridge or shoot a rocket into space. These things are all connected to that core, and that phallogocentric core, that spinal cord. That's what that's designed. It evolved over millennia to allow the men of the culture to gather together and move the body towards that goal. That's what it was for. And this is why these people are so dangerous, is because they're attacking that ability for us to pursue the good, which is why everything is starting to degrade so much. Right. And then to the core masculine idea, this is a really hard idea. This is something that I think is brilliant because you can meditate on it, but it's harsh, is the concept of death and sacrifice. This is how does a warrior love Christ? It's such an interesting question. You've got Christ on the cross. He's like, oh, he lost. He didn't achieve anything. He was no fighter and all this. But it's like, well, why would a European knight love him when he charges against the Muslim or something like that? Why would that happen?
And
it's because Christ
May I speak to that? I think that's the self-sacrificial nature of a masculine man. And so Christ is representing God as, not representing, is God as man, historical person, but he doesn't, the idea that God would have to kill a man, that is so below what God would actually do if he was incarnated. And so he's demonstrating what the world does to divinity, what it does to the truth, what it does to a man who's embodying all these phallogocentric values. The world is going to kill you. And it's going to be by the powers that be, the Romans, the Jews at that point. They're the ones that are going to come and they're going to crucify all of us. But that's also then our ticket to the kingdom, because it demonstrates that we are carrying the cross of Christ. And so you talk about that warrior spirit. I've done streams on, especially in Orthodoxy, we have warrior saints. That is not that's not St. George right here. The whole icon, if you guys can see it, is him with a lance stabbing the serpent, stabbing the dragon, stabbing that sort of serpentine evil force that ensnares all of us. And that is, again, a raging against the dying of the light, because sin, evil, it is a darkness. It doesn't have, at least in Orthodox theology, an ontological existence. So evil and good are not battling itself out. Evil is the privation of. Evil is a black hole. It doesn't actually exist. It only exists in its opposition to God, the light.
Yes.
And so that's the only thing that exists. And getting people to, like you're talking about, the beautiful. Look at Western women. Fat, purple hair, facial piercings. They're hideous. Look at it. So we're talking about the trad wife, and thank God, God has blessed me with a beautiful girlfriend I plan on marrying.
Nice.
So I did get glory to God for that one. But it's so difficult. Look at Western society. I mean, you basically have to go to Eastern Europe. They still have traditional women there, or other parts of the world, because, like you said, strong, vital, healthy, smart, intelligent, and beauty. All these things are being undermined, and it's just so prevalent within all of Western society. It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the party line that you're certain there about, like Christ and the warrior spirit, I think that's such a big deal. It's so hyped, like it's such a fiery take that is missed out so much, because that's precisely it. Like, as I was saying, you see what he was. Like, you see this. He shows up and he's like, man, the temple is full of thieves. The religion is not right. It's upside down. There's no the critical theorists are out here telling me what the Mosaic law is and all this stuff. And he basically says, look, I'm just going to stand for it. And if you take my life, like that's it. I don't care. Like, that's the boundary, this is the law. This is the foot down type thing. And that's so powerful, because it really makes you ask the question of, like, well, what would you fight for? Like, what are you standing for? I think this is where the Christianity is just so pregnant with, it's so sophisticated in how it captures all those ideas together in such a beautiful way. And it leads you towards that idea of, like, Christ is the logos. Christ is good. He's beautiful. He's true. And he's also willing to die for that. Right. And that's like, oh my God, that's male spirit in its essence. This is why so many bros, like, they get into Christianity and they start to see Christ in a new way. They rebaptize him from like Christ being the hippie, weed smoking, Burning Man goer.
We talked about that before coming on, because your experience at a Catholic mass of some sort. I don't know if it's one of the more contemporary. I don't know if it was a trad Latin mass, but yeah, it's contemporary. And it's so disgusting. We're talking about the sort of the cuckold form of Christianity, where Christ is a refugee and he's asexual, so he's sort of like halfway feminine, halfway male, like dangling on the cross. This is not Christianity. That's not what was allowing the martyrs, Saint Ignatius, to actually say, okay, bring on the lions. Go ahead, I'll stand right here. I'm ready to die. And that spirit, that's what converted people in the Roman Colosseum. They come there to watch something gruesome, and they saw a man not back down to anything and allow the lions to ravage him and still profess Christ to the death. And that's what then changes people. That's what they say, oh my God, if he's willing to do that, I want, maybe it is real. And that's how Christianity spread from the onset. Constantine eventually converts the empire, but I've talked about, there's only two religions that really spread by conversion, and that was Buddhism and Christianity. Most other religions sort of stay locally within their demographic, their language group, their ethnic group, and then Islam's really the only religion that, by definition, has always been a dominator culture of converting people by the sword. You either convert you either pay the tax or you go to war to the battle of the death. And that's the three options you have. And, we don't need to get into Islamic theology, but, it's just a different understanding. And so Christ, as that symbol of a man who's willing to die for the truth, because he is the truth, that's what the Western man has lost. I mean, that's the rootlessness, right? Like if we could see Christ as it was presented in the reality of him, men would actually have an orientation in the world. But, the Christianity, like I told you, there was an article I saw today. The Church of England they were meeting today to establish a non-gendered God. So they want to stop calling the Godhead, the Trinity, he. So Christ, the Father, the Holy Spirit, they want to do non-gender. And this is cuck world. This is a man who's watching everything he cares about, for lack of a better term, being screwed over. I mean, that's what a cuck is, right? So it's like, that's exactly what these people are doing.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, man. And it's very, like, Jung has this way of framing Christianity, which is so fascinating, where he describes that we have, the unconscious, and we have all these archetypes that we need to hit, and we've got our shadow and all this. But he basically says that we have this sense of deep self, this deep fundamental identity. Like, we understand our human spirit is the way that the modern people, the secular Redditors say it. Like, what's your human spirit? Oh, it's the love, and it's the believing, what.
Right.
And then he basically says that the identity of Western people, that what sits on that throne of the self is Christ. Like, right. Jesus Christ is that. He's the literally, like, if you dig into your own imagination and do this great artistic process and pull out all the unconscious content, eventually at the bottom you'll find Jesus, and Jesus will come up. And it's like, this is where Jung's criticism of Nietzsche, for example, comes in, where it's like Nietzsche digs down and pulls up Jesus and pulls up the God tied to him, and Nietzsche tries to overcome that, and Jung's basically like, bro, that's like, first of all, you're not even sure if you're correct. That could just be like rebellion at the ultimate boss. Or if you are correct and you're going to do that, you're in for a world of pain, because you're going to have to get destroyed like Christ was. There's no way you can move past something like that without taking on the force of power that went with it. So This is Jung's sort of mystic take. But this is what I find so pernicious about what you see going on with all this stuff. You have these priests come in, and Christ can speak to the male soul to empower men to believe in themselves, to stand for something.
Yes.
Western civilization was healthy for thousands of years with Christianity, It was there. There's no denying that, But then you see them take that symbol and they make him anti-male. They castrate him. They take all those things out of it. And you see this general pattern then where it's like men just can't feel that power. There always has to be something. No matter, you can't have anything. You can't even have Jesus. You can't even have your deepest self. You can't have any of that stuff. It always has to be, there's something wrong with you, and you need to be deferring to some type of other minority or identity or something outside of you. And masculinity is wrong. Creative spirit wrong. God and the masculine God wrong. It has to be a gender neutral God. God doesn't believe in assertiveness and creation, in the beautiful and the good, the strength. It doesn't believe in any of that stuff. He's not real. It's not like that. He was compassion. He was these other things.
Right.
It's always an attempt to subvert that and stew it away. And I think this is a really big problem. It's a really, really big problem. And it's just so parasitic,
right.
It's so demoralizing.
Continuing this line of thought, again, using that metaphor that men are the castle walls and women and children are the jewels inside the castle, what the walls are necessary to protect. You look at what I call the Jezebel spirit. And so you look at the Western woman who is incredibly sexually promiscuous and has multiple partners. Now, again, moving back into a traditional Christian world, the men are strong. And because the men are strong, therefore, the women then have to maintain their boundaries because they want a strong man. I think women naturally want a strong man, but now we see, again, the dissolution of boundaries, as we talked about. The women are trying to become more masculine. They want careers. They want to compete with men, but then they really don't want to compete with men because, and the Jezebel spirit, you look at the Bible, and Jezebel was the wife of King Ahab, and King Ahab was a cucked dude. So Jezebel got Israel to worship Baal and go back to child sacrifice. So you look at abortion in the Western world. This is child sacrifice. And the same thing is true. So because Ahab wasn't able to stand up on his principles, he wasn't connected to God, he wasn't able to do what was right and have that logos-centered mentality and be able to be self-sacrificial. Well, his wife, who was according to all intents and purposes, beautiful and whatnot. Well, she led him. She controlled him. And so he willingly, as the king of Israel, brought back in Baal worship, the subversion, the turning away. And that is a simp. Again, according to Christian scripture, I always argue Adam was the first simp, because creation didn't fall when Eve ate the apple. Creation fell when Adam ate the apple, because men have their eyes on something transcendent. And by doing that, things naturally fall into place. And then women naturally will follow those men. But because the men aren't looking at something transcendent, they're looking at titties and ass and like girls on OnlyFans. Well, now you're being led. You're like Adam doing what Eve tells you to do. You're like Ahab doing exactly what Jezebel tells you to do. And so now we have all these women who are Jezebels, and you can't build families that way. And a nation is only as strong as the family is. And so now we don't have strong families.
You know, I really like this line of thought, because it's quite a shocking one to everyone trying to spin together an ideology. Masculinity is the first principle. The male is the first principle. The male spirit is the first principle. You imagine God as a man. Why is God a man? Why is he male? Well, of course, he's the patriarchal creator. Like, he's the first male, the first establishing force. And all of us men have a little bit of his creative force inside of us. And we're special. We're unique. Like, this is, people hear this stuff and you start to realize that this is one of the cardinal sins to start to speak this way, that men are the generators, men are the creators, men are the asserters, men are the boundary setters, men are the spiritual spinal cord that put together everything. When men are in order, women quite quickly fall into shape, fall into order. And that's the thing we're talking about, beautiful, good and true. It's like the men are strong, the world around them becomes more beautiful, and then the European woman can become incredibly beautiful. She's like naturally just so gorgeous. But without that assertive force, she degenerates and she becomes ugly. And then she doesn't like herself. Right. And she looks in the mirror and she's like, I'm fat and ugly. I feel bad about myself. And she has all these rebellious things like, fat shaming and stuff like this. And she's in pain. She's suffering because the masculine force has lost its spirit. And of course, the whole demoralization project is to try to demoralize that fundamental masculine spirit. Male first energy, it's very interesting. And you notice that that's a cardinal sin across the board. Yep. You can't go into anything. You go to Reddit and you start saying this shit. Doesn't matter if you're a Christian or if you're Jungian or whatever, you'll just get bullets. Bullets will be sent to you. They'll send you car bombs. Like, they will not, they hate that stuff because it's like men have to be evil. Men have to be bad. Men have to be stupid. They all have to be Homer Simpsons who need to be pushed out of decision making and replaced by something else.
Because the state becomes the man. The state becomes the man, and that's when the women get their, they like, the meme that goes around is like a woman telling her husband, he says, make me a sandwich. She says, no, I'm going to work. And then she goes to Subway and she says, well, what do you want on your sandwich? To like some guy like coming in, it's like. But this is it. And this is a really, really powerful point, because I guess sometimes like in our spheres, more reactionary spheres, we get a lot of dudes who are very jaded with girls, which I understand. Right. But women's nature is as subverted as men's nature is. Right. Like, women's natural urges are so monstrously transformed to turn them into these sterilized baby men making Subway sandwiches for a CEO instead of like her husband and her children or something like this. Right. You know the phenomenon. I'm 40 years old. I unfroze my eggs and they don't work. I'm now sterile and I write for BuzzFeed. And you're like, this is this is such a disaster, because what you actually see is that the myth that was sold to her is anti-life. It's anti her own life. Like, this is maybe I would call this the most positive frame you could look at Nietzsche. Nietzsche's positive assertive worldview he is constantly saying this idea of like pro-life or anti-life, life denying perspectives and life affirming perspectives. And you start to see this very, very quickly, that our modern world has this huge conglomerate of perspectives that are about destroying life, destroying the beautiful, the true, and the good. So, we promote things like abortion. We promote things like sodomy. Now, we promote things like usury. We promote all sorts of things in our modern world. We have the gender roles confused. The food is poisonous. We have all sorts of ideas that lead to sterility, that lead to infertility, that lead to euthanasia in Canada, death, that lead to poisoning, that lead to lowering of health, to lead to inability for us to organize as genders, to organize as communities. Yep. We have that fundamental demoralized idea that we Western people, we men are evil. Right. We Western people are evil, which leads to lack of self-confidence, which is the opposite of what life wants. Life wants you to believe in yourself. Right.
uncreative, infertile. And you'll notice that there's this huge life-denying energy,
Yes.
and it infects Christianity. But then there's strong Christians who don't allow that to infect them, and they promote pro-life, aggressive, beautiful, good. They're standing for the logos, and you see this is this amazing energy that is what leads to life is there. And if you go away from that, like you're describing the privatio bon or whatever it's called, if you drift away from that light, you become anti-life. You become a rebellion against that. And you're basically just dying. That's all you are. And you're trying to pull as much of the people who are in the light as possible with you. But that's your only goal. It's like a cancer. It doesn't know what it's doing. Right. It's just absorbing resources. And then once it kills the body, it dies as well. And it's like, oh, fuck, that was a mistake. Well, there you go. So what?
And we would, and as Christians, we'd say that is what the evil one is trying to do. And that is what it's doing inside people. So people believe lies. And this is where, you look at the pandemic, and we would argue a spiritual lens on that phenomenon is the more lies that you internalize and believe, truth itself can only take up so much space within you. So literally the surface area within one's own body it's losing the ability for truth to be there. So it's just darkness, more and more lies. Wow. And so they're going to self-sabotage. They're going to kill themselves, and they're going to climb on to this demonic system that is moving towards this one world antichrist system where it's all anti-human. And so you look at climate change and all this stuff. And there was a guy on Twitter that I shared that he's like, oh, this is what humans have done to nature, and this is what would it look like if humans didn't exist, and it's like a pristine nature. And it's like, this isn't morality. This is, again, this anti-human spirit that all life would be so much better if we all didn't exist. And it's stemming from the fact that you inside yourself actually hate yourself because you've adopted so many lies, because you're engrossed in so many different sins, and therefore you are wanting to destroy the whole system because you really just want to destroy yourself.
And do you know what's so interesting about Christ? Again, this kind of comes from my understanding with Jung and working with people, but these people hate themselves. This is very true. And they're very sick. And I don't mean that as like they're sick and I hate them. It's like they're actually genuinely in a state of suffering, in a state of pain. And they have this internal disgust. It's like, I'm a white person and we're just we don't salt our foods. We don't do seasoning. I'm so pathetic. I'm so disgusting. And there's this, it distorts into these massive projects of it's spreading the darkness, as you would say.
Yeah.
It's these huge projects of anti-health. You're promoting all this sterility, all this death. Yep. And then what's so fascinating with Christ is that Christ's idea is that you can literally hate me. Like, you can come up, I'll give you a baseball bat and you can break my legs and you can beat me and all this, but I will still love you. I'll still accept you no matter what. You can hate me as much as you want, but I'll still accept you. The unconditional love inside of it, the one that they subvert so much.
Right.
But the true meaning of that is that, like, Christ is, I am life. Through me, you get life. And it's like, you can hate yourself as much as you want, but I still love you. This is why you should believe in life. And then when you believe in Christ in this way, he actually gives you back your life. You can stop hating yourself.
Oh, that's perfect, brother.
Stop being anti-life, and then actually go forward with that and actually carry that energy forward. And I see that so much that all these people, it's like, man, they look like lost Christians,
Right.
They look like they're at war with the world.
And that's where I want to connect this raging against the dying of the light with the redemptive arc of Christ. And so all of us Western men, we've all succumbed to it. I remember I was exposed to pornography at the age of 10. I think, like watching hardcore pornography. And so it's like our cultures have been so subverted that all of us have been that person that has fallen away. But again, like you said, Christ still loves us. And so there's still the opportunity for salvation. The first person in the kingdom was the thief to the right of Christ. Who knows the atrocities he did? My patron saint is St. Patrick of Ireland. He was a murderer. Right. And so, but
hey, don't be saying that, right?
Well, that's what I love about him is that the way that he then found Christ, telling him that the boat's ready for him, and he literally flees one night and goes all the way across country, and the boat is there that the angel told him would be there. And then, it sets this whole arc that all he wanted to do was go home. But once he got home, he said, you know what, I'm going back to the place that I was enslaved in because I'm going to kill the snakes, the serpents, St. George, the warrior spirit. It's the same thing. And that, right now, whether you're, again, just like St. Patrick, my patron saint, You can hop on board now. You can begin to rage against the dying of the light. And this now gives your life purpose. This gives your life an orientation. It gives you the opportunity as a man to embody the good, the true, and the beautiful, and stamp out all these serpents.
Man, I think that's a big idea, because when you're dealing with these people, maybe even people on the fence, but it's such an interesting frame, because how are they trying to frame you? Like they saying you're a degenerate masculine chauvinist, or you're an ignorant Christian trying to bash me with a Bible or something like that. And it's like, listen, put all that aside. You're suffering. You're in pain. You're unhealthy. And there's a reason for this, right? Because of the way you see the world. You're anti-life. But let's put all that aside and just talk about the facts. You're suffering. You're doing surgeries on yourself and confusing yourself. You're taking these hormones that are screwing you up. You're aborting your own children. You're sterilizing your best years. You're not creating art. You're not creating beauty. You're doing all this. You're traumatizing yourself. You're participating in these things that are hurting other people. And it's like, you don't have to do that, you know? You don't have to be at a constant rebel. You don't have to one-up us. You don't have to be like, we don't want you, you know, you can just live happy. You can actually overcome that suffering. You can go and you can just accept. This is what Jesus is so powerful. It's like, he's just saying, I love you. Just accept it. That's all I want. Yes. I don't want anything else from you. I just want you to say, he's trying to say, look, I'll give you a hug if you want, but you don't have to take it, but it's just there. And it's so interesting that it's like, that's sort of saying, you can just stop hating life, and you can just start enjoying life and participating in life and promoting life and aligning with life and aligning with the beautiful, the good, and the true, the logos. And that becomes generative, and it's abundant, and it gives everybody wins as a consequence of this. And it's just so elegant and simple, and so psychologically difficult for people, because that comes with that constriction of saying, I've decided that this is the way the world works. It's Marxist, you know, and then you're stuck within the confines of that worldview. And then you've got such a challenge on top of yourself.
And that's why they can't love, right? You look at the inversion. And so these people that love social justice and all this stuff, they're actually the most unloving people, that you have to totally buy into their worldview, and then they'll love you, right? The whole cancel culture, that's what this is. This is not forgiveness. This is the lack of, in the name of being open-minded and inclusive. Well, you're extremely exclusive for those who don't buy into your ideology. And so these people they're angry. They're angry with themselves. They're angry with the world. And it's this internal disposition, because they're against the structure of reality. They're in opposition to logos itself, and the way they live, the way they think, the way they move, the way they dress, the way they interact with people. It's like, dude, you've brought it onto yourself. And this is how the West, and this gets back into, you know, we were talking privately about Oswald Spengler, but that Faustian spirit, right? So Faust is, he makes that deal with the devil, but it's ultimately self-destructive. And that's so I think it's so impeccable how Oswald Spengler, characterized the Apollonian cultures and the Faustian culture, and that Western civilization is a Faustian culture that has basically bought into this idea of progress through technology and this sort of magical association and alliance with the devil, if you will. But it's like we've totally undermined ourselves in this hope for like eternal progress, where we're totally leaving this phallogocentric, this central nervous system, the spinal cord that gives us life. That, again, it's like the deal that we made with the devil years ago, centuries ago. It's coming back to fruition, in that we're just living in that's why people love The Walking Dead. We're living in cultures filled with zombies. They're literally killing themselves all around us.
Yes, it's surreal. I think, and this is always a very fascinating way of looking at it, because you're taking, like, us Westerners, there's definitely these agents that are launching themselves upon our spinal cord and demoralizing us and leading to the qualitative experience of young men to be very, very bad, especially if you're Western, because everything about us is subverted. Like, you're not allowed to be a man at all. This is why the likes of Tate, like, I know a lot of people get mad at Tate, but like, why did he do so well? That's a better question to ask. Well, it's because he went up and he just basically asserted male reality. And that's just the biggest taboo of all in some ways. And maybe not the biggest, but it's a pretty big taboo. And then
it's definitely up there. Could be the biggest.
And this is what's fascinating. And then that's where the conversation is at. But then I guess you could also say it's like, maybe a more sophisticated way, it's like, how much is this a consequence of the West itself? Like, Christianity, for example, was towards the end of it, it was very heavily for the women. You know, the church was really just where all the women would go. It had a low attendance of men, and all the men were running off the science and whatnot. And like the likes of, you know, that was sort of like the libertine men. They weren't liberals, but they would have believed in God, but he would have been an awful lot more of a, like, they'd all be going to these occult fraternities and stuff like this. And this is these types of characters, and that's the energy that was going forward. And they were following that Faustian spirit. And it's sort of like, all right, look where it's gotten us.
Right.
All right, maybe our next question is, where do we go from there?
Well, talking about Andrew Tate, and I did a whole stream before it blew up, but I saw that it was getting ready to, and so I have my own, obviously, criticisms, his conversion to Islam, some of the ways in which he lives his life. But aside from that, getting back to the question that you're highlighting, why was he so popular in the first place, is that, you know, he highlighted that men have to make ourselves. Women are born with an innate value because they're women and they are procreative and they can have children as long as they don't sterilize themselves, which the world's trying to get them to do. But men, we're not built with innate value, other than most likely most of us would have died in war. We have to make ourselves. We have to build ourselves. We have to learn. We have to develop skills. We have to develop talents. And that is part of this masculine process. And, you know, even within Christianity, this is a pill that more Christians need to swallow. That, you know, we've talked, you know, privately that you've had some bad experiences with ortho bros and Twitter, and it's like some of these dudes are pretty feminine, and it's like they're catty, and they're not, you know, they're not embodying a sort of male spirit, a more traditional spirit, and our tradition itself offers us this. And it means that we have to work on ourselves. We work on ourselves to be more like Christ, but we have to work on ourselves to build skills, to make money, to have a business. Everybody wants these trad waifu, you know, the trad virgin girl, and it's like, bro, you're overweight, you don't do anything. Like, it's great, you know, God bless you for doing your prayers. That's excellent, but you got to make yourself as a man. There's more to this than just sitting here and then judging and criticizing everybody. Oh, you're too worldly, or you're too vain, or you're too into masculinity. It's like, bro, it's you, man. Like, you got to work on yourself, and you got to make yourself, and then God can give you that woman that will match who you are and your purpose. And so I think for a lot of the Christian men is the men have to figure out what their purpose is. Like, I believe God gives us purposes. And it may be to own your own plumbing business. It may be to work, you know, in corporate America. I don't know what it is, but that's between you and God. That's something that you have to work on and develop. And that's a journey. That's a journey of going from this thing to that thing and gaining this skill and that skill. And, oh, I don't really like this, but I like this. And moving through life.